A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
As we do on a Monday, we like to check in with the Australian Christian Lobby and Wendy Francis, National Director of Politics for the ACL, back with us. Hey Wendy, welcome back to 2020.
Always so good to talk to you, Neil. We appreciate you talking to us on Mondays.
Hey Wendy, let's start with your thoughts about what is, rolling around in a lot of minds this morning, wondering what hit us, wondering what happened. It is highly criticised now, and if you read media around the place, you'll be talking through and reading about commentary on the opening ceremony in Paris. What were your impressions?
Yeah, I didn't stay up and watch it, but when the next morning hit and I saw what had happened, I must admit I just had this really guttural response that I felt so sick in the stomach. It really shocked me, and I felt overwhelmingly sad that something so precious to me, but to millions of people around the globe, was mocked in such a horrendous way. It really did shock me and upset me terribly. I mean, it was a parody of the Lord's Supper with highly sexualized people clearly identifying as transgender. But I think, as you would know, because you know me quite well, Neil, that one of the things that upset me the most was the children being exposed, both at the table but also watching. So we would expect children around the world to be watching this spectacular to open the Olympic Games, something that is surely something that we want to inspire our children with, and they are watching a highly sexualized parody of something that is so special. That to me was diabolical.
And I've seen some commentary too, trying to paint the imagery as depicting something other than the Last Supper. But it's pretty hard when you've got, famous paintings of the Last Supper put alongside the image that somehow or other you haven't had people who are desperately trying to copy the image. And as you say, a sexualized Last Supper, men pretending to be women, a parody of it, and we might even wonder, Wendy, why they would have such a imagery presented in, the opening of an Olympics. So that's pretty challenging, isn't it?
It's impossible to understand. Like, we're sitting around a table and we're discussing what we're going to have in the opening ceremony, and that comes up. Surely somebody's going to say, look, no, that's not going to be appropriate. We've got athletes who are Christians. We have got journalists who are Christians, and they are reporting on something that surely must have just really ripped them apart. I think what it does say to us is that we just desperately need to pray for France, because in thinking it all through, to me as well, I mean, even the organisers themselves are not saying that it's not a parody on the Lord's Supper. I mean, they're making it really clear that it was. So people who are trying to excuse it away, I mean, I just think, don't even try. But what it does mean, Neil, is that we've got to pray for France, because the Bible, I went back to look, what does the Lord say about things like this? And Galatians 6:7 says, do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. And it says, a man reaps what he sows. So we need to pray for France. And, the amazing thing in France at the moment is the Bible Society is there. They're handing out Bibles. People, particularly following this opening ceremony, people are gathering to sing praises to Jesus in the streets. I'm seeing that on Facebook, and I'm just thinking, wow, God, you can turn even the most diabolical thing to good. But I don't think we should just roll over and just ignore it. If my mum and dad were mocked in that way, I would be outraged. How much more should I be outraged when it's my Lord Jesus? I am outraged. But I am called to pray. That's what I'm called to do. Pray in the light of my outrage. Yeah.
So France, one of the most secularized nations on the face of the earth, their Christian population predominantly Catholic, but you're even saying there's a betrayal here. It's a betrayal of those Christian athletes who are competing. There's a betrayal there of any Christians. And as we come back to, and why would it be included in some sort of an opening ceremony like this anyway? But there is a betrayal that happens when this sort of stuff becomes a global focus.
It is a betrayal, because even the journalists, they don't know very far ahead of what's going to happen, because it's all kept in secret. And so you imagine one of the Christian journalists there, all of a sudden they're confronted with this scene. How do they respond to that? I mean, I just put myself in the position, and I just thought, I reckon I'd have to stand up from the desk and walk away and have a break, because I just don't know how I would even respond without shock. And you wouldn't be able to do that. So I do think it was a betrayal. I think it was very purposefully done. And I think France have shown themselves to be completely insensitive to a large proportion of people around the globe. And Galatians 6:7 says, don't be deceived. God can't be mocked. And a man reaps what he sows. So pray for France. Yeah.
When we talk about, what do we do? And I think there's so much wisdom in your advice, your wisdom there, Wendy. Pray for France, because this is a very challenging time, because there's a lot of people who've been saying, well, how do we respond? Do we just boycott watching the games? I mean, whose fault is it? I mean, it's not our athletes' fault. Our athletes are there they've turned up to represent our nation on the world stage and do us proud there. But, so whose fault is it? Is it the IOC's fault? Is it the fault of the French people? I mean, I guess people who choreographed and planned such an event, they'd be the ones at fault, but it's wondering how you might respond here.
Yeah, so I think the praying is the most important immediate thing, and particularly pray for the Bible Society who are handing out the Bibles at the moment. That's an amazing opportunity because people are talking about Christianity because of what's happened. So that take that opportunity. But I think the other action I believe is important is 2032. The Olympics are going to be on Australian soil. And so we need to be aware that there are influencers that would want to bring a similar type of offensive thing to our opening ceremony. So as we approach 2032, and already they will be planning what our opening ceremony will be like, we should really be praying and getting as involved as we possibly can, pleading with the government, pleading with whoever to make sure that our opening ceremony, and I don't think now's the time, but I think, once this Olympics is over, let's try to help the athletes to enjoy as much as they possibly can what they have built, what they have trained for years, and they're doing. So I don't think it is the athletes that we should be penalising, and let's just let them enjoy this now. But once this is over, and we're preparing for Australian Olympics, let's really try and make the most of our opportunity to impact the government to make sure that our opening ceremony is not offensive to anyone around the globe. I mean, we can only imagine if one of the other religions had been parodied in the way that Christianity has been. It would have, I think there could have been outrage on the streets. And Christians don't do that. We do turn the other cheek. But I think also we need to make sure that we don't just turn the other cheek and seem as if it doesn't matter. It does matter.
And I guess those words that we might be familiar with from the scriptures, God will not be mocked, that when the mocker stands up and begins to be loud in their mockery, look out, we have an all-powerful, almighty God. Hey, let's move on.
Yes,
there's lots of things that are going on. Let's come back to the CAS review. The CAS review is like a globally accepted report now around gender ideology, but you're concerned, Wendy Francis, that none of our state and territory leaders are even seem to be looking at the CAS review and taking it seriously.
No, they're completely ignoring it. And look, I'll try and be quick on things because we've spent a bit of time on the Olympics, which was really good. But the CAS review, the response on gender ideology, it is being ignored by all of our governments. the CAS review commented negatively on Melbourne Children's Hospital Gender Clinic, which is our premier gender clinic in our nation. They commented negatively on the treatment regime being used there, and they also said that there is no support from psychotherapy, psychology or psychiatry, any of the medical practitioners for the affirmation method of treatment. There is no research that would support the affirmation method, and our governments are still ignoring a call for an independent inquiry here in Australia into our gender clinics and the treatment that they are employing. And it's diabolical. It's time for an inquiry. I think at the moment we've all got election fever because there's elections held everywhere, ACT, Northern Territory, Queensland for a start, very soon, but also we're in federal election period. And so the MPs are avoiding anything that they might think is controversial. But this ignoring of this CAS review, the longer they ignore it, the more children are being harmed by this affirmation method.
So it would only take one of the states or one of the territories to have an independent inquiry, and all of this stuff could be brought out into the open. Wouldn't be able to be ignored then, would it?
Correct. So we want a medical inquiry the same as the CAS review. So it's not a government inquiry so we want no bias, but we want a medical inquiry as to what is the true research behind these puberty blockers, hormones treatment for young children, and what the long-term effects are. And we know from the CAS review that it would end up being, okay, no puberty blockers, no hormone therapy for young children. That's just got to stop. And the longer we wait, the more children are actually entering these treatment pathways that are only going to lead to a really regret and disaster for them. We know that certainly from the CAS review, but we also know it from what's happening here in Australia, and the more the detransitioners are coming out.
So the longer our governments drag their feet and ignore the possibility of having an independent review and some truth coming into the debate, it's all the more children who will be suffering here in Australia. Let's move on. The Religious Freedom Bill, we've talked about this a lot now over the past year or two, significant conversations around religious freedom. Looks like there's a bit of a cooling off here with elections looming. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's right. This was an election promise from the Albanese government. And once again, we had the promise from the Scott Morrison government. It didn't eventuate because it was too hard. Then Albanese said, I will fix it in my term, but now he has said no, he won't, because he wanted bipartisan support from Peter Dutton. That was not forthcoming, and we were glad it wasn't, because it was a terrible bill that they were putting forward. Mind you, we didn't even see all the details of the bill. That was being kept hidden. So now it's no longer in the mix prior to the next election. So once again, we head into an election with this up in the air. It seems as if it's in the too hard basket, because any such bill is always weighed up against the rights of LGBTQPA plus community rights, and it would seem as if the LGBT alphabet rights always win over religious freedom. And so this is a difficulty for them, because constitutionally and also in our agreements, our global agreements, religious freedom is a right that they must give. And so as soon as you start putting it down in black and white, then there are competing rights that they would see as more important. So once again, it's in the too hard basket, Neil, and we're not going to see it before the next election.
Okay, another issue. Lots of our listeners actually have been busy knitting baby booties and sending them on to the Australian Christian Lobby. You've got a big display that's planned outside Parliament House in Canberra coming up 14th of August. Give us some insight here into how that's going to look.
You should see the National Office. Thousands of baby booties have been knitted and coming in, and every one of those baby booties will display a life lost through abortion in this beautiful demonstration that we do. But then afterwards, they go onto the feet of little tiny little newborns, because each of those baby booties are snapped up by neonatal wards. Hospitals around the nation want them because they have neonatal wards that tiny little babies are born and they need the booties, and also pregnancy support centres. So that every baby booty has two uses, and it's this display of a life lost, but then a life who has their feet warmed by these baby booties. So people are sending them in by their hundreds, groups are sending them in. And what I love about them is that we get these notes saying, I've prayed over these booties. And so for me, that's very special, that a baby is going to have booties that have been prayed over. That baby has been prayed over before they're even born. So it's a wonderful event that we hold each year.
So another couple of weeks away to the 14th of August, when they'll go on display outside Parliament House in Canberra. Is there room for a few more booties last minute?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. We're taking them right up until the 9th of August when we start laying them out. We pin them very carefully to a large black piece of material that we have, because we don't want them to fly away or be treated in any way disrespectfully. So we very carefully pin them. So 9th of August is the deadline for receiving them. We would love to receive more.
Okay, just quickly, there's something very important that's happening today, a trial starting today of Dr. Jereth Koch, and it'll be in Melbourne, and some are describing this trial as like a government-funded persecution by lawfare against freedom. The Jereth Koch case, are you across details there?
Look, I am, and Jereth has been waiting for this trial date for 5 years, Neil. I think that's important because that has been part of the punishment, really, for Jereth. Now, Jereth is a medical professional. He had more than 15 years' experience, but in 2019 he was suspended by the medical authorities, and it was basically over his conservative but his Christian views on abortion, on gender transitioning, and also sexuality. And he posted these views, like not in any way offensively, but he posted his views on his personal social media. He never received a single complaint from any of his patients, people on social media. Now he's been waiting for this trial date for the medical board to complete its investigation so that he can defend the allegations. And in that time, he's been unable to practice medicine. So he is actually retrained, and he's taken up other areas of work just so that he can support his wife and family. So it is terrible what has happened to Jereth. But can I say that Jereth is just an amazing man. He remains absolutely steadfast in his Christian faith, but also standing up for religious freedom for every Australian.
Another one of those unbelievable things that is happening for real in real time, and that trial starts today, and hopefully we'll be able to bring an update sometime through the week. Hey, Wendy, election time. There's an election coming for the Northern Territory. There's one coming in the ACT. There's a state election in the state of Queensland coming up, and then, who knows, maybe even an early federal election, but one that could be due sometime early next year. It is election time. What's the ACL doing in preparation?
So we're running forums as normal. We are asking questions of all of the MPs. We want our main aim at election time is to inform people so that they can go to the ballot box and vote with all of the information that they need to choose the candidate that will best represent their views. So we're just at the moment gathering information from each one of them, but we will be holding forums, as I said. We will be holding some forums in person, but we will also be doing webinars online. That seems to be easier for people sometimes to be able to just log on online. But these elections, every single one of them, are really important. The concern, I guess, that we have in each one of these elections is we do not want to see minority governments with the Greens holding the balance of power. And I say that because the Greens really have revealed their hand as being anti-faith, anti-Christian, anti-freedom. And so we are really trying to make sure that people know who they're voting for and what they're voting for when they go to that ballot box.
Well, Wendy Francis, always good getting your insights. And for listeners to take advantage of the resource that's available, you should go to the ACL website, acl.org.au, and no doubt there'll be special pages for each of those elections in the states and territories. And Wendy Francis, certainly for listeners around the baby booties, yes, there's still a little room there. But all of these other very contentious issues, very, very contentious and controversial issues, no doubt listeners will want to avail themselves of some resource and available articles and some in-depth understanding of what's going on here in Australia. acl.org.au is the website. The Australian Christian Lobby, acl.org.au. Wendy Francis is the National Director of Politics for the ACL. Wendy, thanks so much for another great update today on 2020.
Thank you so much, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.